They said she would never marry, not unless she changed her mind about the condition. And yet, year after year, she stayed firm, watching every suitor walk away defeated, some angry, some heartbroken. I remember the first time I heard about Halima. I was at a family gathering when my cousin, Jide, told me about her. Jide was from Kano, but Halima was from the southwestern part of Nigeria, in a small village outside Ibadan. Despite the distance, word of her condition had traveled far and wide. It was a story that sparked curiosity and caution, especially among young men looking for a wife. Halima was known for two things, her beauty and the strange test she set for any man who wanted to marry her. People from all over Nigeria knew of her. She was a rare mix of beauty and intelligence, which made her even more captivating. Halima was educated, independent, and had a quiet grace that drew people to her. But, unlike other young women in the village, she didn't seem interested in marriage, at least, not the usual kind. She had a rule, one that no man had been able to meet. Jide, my cousin, had tried to talk to her once. He was one of the first to attempt her test. I remember him telling me that she had listened to him quietly, her expression never changing, and then she told him the rule. I will marry the man who can stay in my family's old house for 3 nights, alone, she had said. No phone, no visitors, just him and the house. It didn't sound that hard, and maybe that's why Jide agreed so quickly. But what none of us knew then was that the house wasn't just any old family home. It was a place with a history, a dark and unsettling one. People said it was haunted, cursed even. For generations, Halima's family had owned that house, but nobody lived there anymore. It was abandoned, left to the elements. The villagers whispered that strange things happened there, especially at night. The first night, Jide didn't sleep at all. He was stubborn, though, and stayed awake, convinced he could handle anything. But by the second night, he was a wreck. He'd heard voices, strange, distant whispers that grew louder as the night went on. It was like they were speaking directly to him, saying things he couldn't quite make out, yet it filled him with a dread he couldn't shake. On the third night, he packed his things and left before midnight, too shaken to stay any longer. After Jide, a few others tried. There was Ayo, a mechanic from Lagos. Ayo was brave, confident, and not the type to back down from a challenge. But he left after the first night, his face pale and shaken. He told us later that he'd felt something watching him, a presence that he couldn't see but felt pressing down on him, making it hard to breathe. Then came Musa, a wealthy businessman from the north. He was so sure of himself, bragging that he wasn't afraid of ghosts or curses. But by the end of the second night, Musa had also left, and he didn't say a word about what happened. He just shook his head and refused to talk about it. At this point, it wasn't just the men who were intrigued. The whole village was buzzing with stories of Halima and her condition. Some people thought she was bewitched, others believed she was simply testing men to see who was worthy. A few thought she might actually be protecting them from something terrible. But nobody knew for sure, and the mystery only made her story grow. By the time Adamu, a young man from a nearby village, tried his luck, there was a strange energy in the air. People crowded around, whispering about whether he would finally be the one to break the curse. Adamu was poor, just a farmer, but he was deeply religious and believed that his faith would protect him. The night before he went to the house, he prayed and fasted, convinced that he could do what no other man had done. The first night was quiet for him. He stayed in a small room on the ground floor, keeping his Bible close and reciting verses whenever he felt afraid. But as the night went on, he started hearing things. It began with a soft tapping, like fingers on the wall. He tried to ignore it, thinking it was just the wind or his mind playing tricks. But the tapping got louder, turning into a knocking, then pounding, echoing through the empty house. By midnight, he was shaking. The Bible fell from his hands, and he felt something cold, almost like a breath, right by his ear. He ran out of the house, too scared to even look back. The villagers found him the next morning, wandering near the river, mumbling about a shadow that had followed him all the way to the door. After Adamu, the story took on a life of its own. Halima was no longer just a beautiful woman with a strange rule, she became a legend. People said she had powers, that she was cursed, that she was testing men to find someone with a pure heart. But nobody knew the truth. One night, I decided to ask Halima directly. We had known each other since childhood, and though we were not close, I hoped she would open up to me. When I found her, she was sitting by a tree, watching the sunset. Halima, I began, trying to find the right words. Why do you ask men to stay in that house? Why that condition? She looked at me, her expression thoughtful. Do you believe in fate? She asked. I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded. My family has a history, she continued. That house, it holds memories. And not all of them are good. She paused, looking down at her hands. I don't want a man who only loves me for my looks or my family's name. I want someone who can understand the darkness in my past, someone who won't run when things get hard. But Halima, I said, they're not just running because it's hard. They are terrified. She nodded slowly. I know. And maybe that's my fault. Maybe I've made the test too difficult. But it's the only way I know to protect myself. After that conversation, I understood a little more. Halima wasn't testing men to prove a point or because she was cursed. She was trying to find someone who would stay, no matter what, who would see her for who she was, scars and all. And though it seemed impossible, I couldn't blame her for wanting that. Over the years, a few more men tried. There was Emeka, a tall, handsome Igbo man who owned a successful business in Enugu. He was charming, confident, and convinced he could tame her, as he put it. But he left after the second night, looking as though he had aged 10 years. There was also Tand, a local school teacher who had always admired her from afar. He lasted longer than most, 2.5 nights, before he, too, left, whispering about voices that wouldn't stop calling his name. The list went on, and as Halima grew older, people began to whisper about her in a different way. Some said she was destined to be alone, that she had made her bed and now had to lie in it. Others said she should give up her condition and settle down before it was too late. But Halima never wavered. She continued to wait, believing that someday, someone would be able to understand her. And maybe, just maybe, that person would come. The years passed, and soon, most of the village had resigned themselves to the idea that Halima would remain unmarried. Some even began to pity her, whispering behind her back that she'd wasted her youth on a foolish dream. But she never seemed affected by it. She continued with her daily life, helping her family on their farm and tutoring the younger children in the village. If the whispers and the gossip bothered her, she didn't let it show. And then one day, a man named Bayo arrived. Bayo was different from the others. He was quiet, reserved, and didn't seem interested in wealth or status. He came from a humble family and worked as a carpenter in a neighboring town. He had heard about Halima from a distant cousin who lived in our village, but unlike the others, he wasn't drawn to her because of her beauty or the challenge of her condition. He was drawn to her because of her spirit, the way she stood firm in what she believed, despite what others said about her. When Bayo met Halima, he didn't approach her with grand gestures or bold declarations. Instead, he simply asked if he could get to know her. They started meeting by the river in the evenings, talking about their lives, their families, and their dreams. Bayo was patient, listening more than he spoke, and Halima found herself sharing things with him that she had never shared with anyone else. After a few weeks, Beo asked her about the condition. "Why do you make men stay in that house?" he asked gently, his tone filled with genuine curiosity rather than judgment. Halima looked away, her fingers nervously tracing patterns in the dirt. "It's not just a test," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a way to see who can understand the parts of me that aren't beautiful, the parts that are scarred and broken." Beo nodded thoughtfully. "But have you ever considered that maybe some scars don't need to be understood to be loved?" Halima looked at him, startled by his words. She had never thought of it that way. To her, the test was a necessary barrier, a way to shield herself from people who only wanted the good parts of her life. But as she listened to Beo, she began to wonder if perhaps she had been pushing people away without giving them a fair chance. Beo didn't press the issue further, but a few days later, he approached her again. "I'll stay in the house," he said, his voice steady. "I don't know if I'll succeed, but I want to try. Not because I think I'm stronger or better than the others, but because I want to understand you, Halima. All of you." Halima was hesitant. She didn't want Beo to end up like the others, scared, defeated, or worse. But she could see the sincerity in his eyes, the calm determination that set him apart from the others who had tried. So, with a deep breath, she agreed. That night, Beo packed a small bag with a flashlight, a blanket, and a few other essentials. He wasn't superstitious, but he took his Bible with him, just in case. As he approached the old house, he felt a shiver run down his spine. The building loomed in the darkness, its windows empty and hollow, like eyes staring back at him. But he squared his shoulders, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The first night was uneventful, mostly. He explored the house, familiarizing himself with the layout and trying to get comfortable. But as the night wore on, he started hearing things, soft whispers, faint footsteps that seemed to echo through the empty rooms. He ignored them at first, telling himself it was just the wind or his mind playing tricks. But by midnight, the noises grew louder. He heard a voice, quiet yet insistent, calling his name. Beo tried to stay calm, reciting verses from the Bible to keep his fear at bay. He reminded himself why he was there, thinking of Halima and the trust she had placed in him. The second night was worse. The whispers returned, and this time, they sounded closer, almost as if someone was standing right behind him. He felt a cold breeze, despite the windows being shut, and the air felt thick, like it was pressing down on him. At one point, he thought he saw a shadow moving across the room, but when he turned to look, there was nothing there. By the third night, Beo was exhausted, both physically and mentally. He hadn't slept properly in days, and the weight of the house's presence was beginning to take its toll. But he held on, clinging to his faith and his determination to see this through. He spent the night praying, asking for strength, and as dawn approached, he felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. When morning finally came, Beo left the house and returned to the village, his face pale but resolute. He had survived, and though he couldn't fully explain what he had experienced, he knew he had faced something powerful, something that most people would never understand. Halima was waiting for him by the river, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. When she saw him, her face broke into a smile, and for the first time, she let her guard down, allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found someone who could truly understand her. They didn't speak much that day. They didn't need to. In that quiet moment, sitting by the river with the early morning sun casting a warm glow around them, they both knew that they had found something rare and precious. Halima's heart was finally at peace, and Beo, for his part, had found a love that was worth every challenge. The villagers were stunned when they heard the news. For years, Halima had been the talk of the town, the woman with the impossible condition. And now, she had found someone who was willing to face the darkness with her, not because he was fearless or strong, but because he was willing to stay, no matter what. And so, Halima and Bayo were married in a simple ceremony, surrounded by friends and family. There were no grand celebrations, no lavish feasts, but there was a quiet joy that filled the air, a sense of hope that had been absent for so long. In the end, Halima's story wasn't about a test or a curse. It was about finding someone who could accept her darkness and all, someone who could look beyond her beauty and see the person she truly was. And as they began their new life together, Halima knew that she had made the right choice, that her condition had led her to a love that was as deep and enduring as the roots of an ancient tree. They say that love is simple, but sometimes, it takes a little darkness to show just how bright it can be. After the wedding, Bayo and Halima settled into a life of quiet contentment, but their story became a powerful lesson in the village and beyond. People came from nearby towns to hear the tale of the woman who had tested the hearts of many and the man who had endured. The village elders often spoke of them, weaving their story into sermons and folk tales, drawing morals that resonated deeply with all who listened. One day, while sitting under the shade of an old tree, Bayo shared with Halima the thoughts that had kept him strong during those 3 nights in the haunted house. "I realized," he said softly, "that we can't love only what's easy or beautiful in someone. True love requires us to accept the shadows as well, to embrace the fears and doubts that make us human." Halima listened, tears in her eyes, and held his hand. For so long, she had feared that no one could truly understand her, that her past and her pain were too much for anyone to bear. But Bayo's quiet strength had proven to her that love didn't mean perfection. It meant staying, even when things got hard, even when life became a test in ways no one could anticipate. As their life together blossomed, Halima and Bayo continued to share this wisdom with others. Their experiences and their story grew into timeless lessons, passed down through generations. 1. True love sees beyond the surface. Halima's story taught that genuine love isn't about appearances or initial attractions. It's about looking beyond the surface to understand and embrace the person as they truly are, including the parts they hide and the scars they carry. A love that only seeks beauty is shallow, but one that endures through hardship is rare and priceless. 2. Patience and understanding are the foundation of lasting relationships. Bayo's patient understanding, his willingness to listen and respect Halima's fears, became an example for others. A good relationship isn't rushed, it's built on mutual respect and the grace to give each other time to heal and grow. 3. Courage isn't just about facing external dangers but embracing inner fears. Staying in the house was Bayo's test of courage, but it wasn't about bravery in the face of spirits or strange occurrences. It was about facing his own fear, his own doubts, and remaining steadfast despite them. This lesson reminded people that often, our biggest battles are within ourselves. 4. Accepting one's past is key to finding peace. Halima had struggled for years, feeling that her past would keep her from happiness. But by allowing herself to be vulnerable with Bayo, she learned that acceptance is a path to healing. No one can move forward while carrying shame or guilt about their past. Halima's story encouraged others to embrace their own histories, no matter how painful, and to seek relationships with people who accept them fully. 5. Challenges are not always meant to be conquered, but understood. Halima's condition was a reflection of her own need for understanding and acceptance. She hadn't intended for her test to be an insurmountable obstacle but rather a way to find someone who would be willing to see her fully. This lesson encouraged people to view challenges not just as barriers but as opportunities for deeper understanding and connection. 6. Love means staying, even when it's hard. Bayo's determination to stay through the strange events in the house taught everyone a powerful lesson. Real love means standing by someone's side, not only in good times but also in the darkest hours. Love isn't about perfection, it's about commitment, the decision to stay even when things are difficult. As the years went on, Bayo and Halima's story became a cherished tale, told around fires and in family gatherings, a reminder that sometimes, the strongest bonds are forged through tests, trials, and a willingness to understand the parts of others that few people ever see. Halima had waited patiently for the one who could face her shadows without fear, and in the end, she found a love that was not only enduring but filled with grace, resilience, and hope. And so, their story became more than a tale of marriage, it became a symbol of what it means to love and to be loved truly, the kind of love that doesn't flinch at shadows but instead brings light into them, showing that every person, no matter their past, is deserving of acceptance and compassion.
Thanks for watching this folktale. Please like the video and subscribe our channel.